Quorum being present, calling the June 24th meeting of the Wiscasset Planning Board to order. First order of business is the approval of minutes of June 10th, 2019.
I move that we pass the minutes as written.
We have a motion to pass as written. We have a second?
Yep.
Jason seconds. Any discussion, comments, corrections? All those in favor? Passed. First order of business tonight. One abstain, sorry. Is Christopher Montoro?
Yep.
Please come up and take the table. Tell us what you'd like to do.
Okay, so I would like to change the use of the 568 Bath Road from a commercial, I think it was a motorcycle apparel shop, to a brewery tap room.
My review of our site plan ordinance says this will need a full site plan review application, and he has submitted at least the basic paperwork. One of the things I'm missing, obviously most, is a current site plan. But I haven't gone through it line by line. But number B7, bearings and distances of all property lines of the property developed from the source of this information prepared by a professional land surveyor as a recent boundary survey. So you will need a recent boundary survey of your property,
Okay.
which will be incorporated into an actual site plan showing us what you plan to do, where the parking is going to be, if you're tearing buildings down or building new buildings. If you're modifying buildings, I guess we have to know at least the basics of construction there.
Right. I was planning on just keeping the building as is, if possible.
Are those buildings on foundations?
I don't think so. If it is an existing building,
Yeah, you'll want to check, at least start with our code officer, but since you'll also be an eating establishment, we'll want to check with the state fire marshal, and I'm not sure what other state departments about it being on posts.
What we can do with that, with some slab on the bottom.
Yeah, but you don't have to do it if you don't have to do it.
Uh,
If you don't have to do it, I'm not going to try to make you do
Yeah,
it, but
we're gonna talk to the, that's,
if you're putting in,
I think it's more than 70 years old building, it's just the commercial building. They use for that for different stock, they use for restaurant, they use
it's
for
been used for many
Yeah.
things. And
anything,
there is a survey of your property on records of it. I don't know how many decades old now, but I did it, but it's on record, so your surveyor has a place to start. Other than that, what you need to do is, and you did a bunch of it with what you submitted so far. You need to do the review criteria and answers. I did not really read those as if I was deciding tonight whether they were good or bad. But then, for instance, I could just say, erosion control is never not applicable. If you're doing any construction, it is applicable. If their standard statement is something to the effect of, will comply with Maine DEP best practices managements manual.
now, would that be something I require from the DEP for some type of certification, or?
Any contractor with the salt knows what that manual is, but that's what your answer is. It's not that it's not applicable, it's that you will comply with the best management for erosion control. And then obviously you have to do it. So someplace, whoever is doing your construction, if it's your own or something else, you need to have the manual so you know. But it's basically what you're talking about, is silt fences or other forms of barriers to keep water runoff during construction contained. Obviously, if you're not digging holes, you're not doing too much ground disturbance. So. But we need to know that. already have a copy of your deed. And 10 copies with them, right? Or 8 copies? I'm fairly certain we would hold a public hearing.
Site plan review on public.
Site plan, yeah, that's a little bit not mandatory, but I'd say we would. And that before there'd be a site walk, this is considered your pre-application meeting with your full application. If you want a waiver to any of the standards, put it in writing at that time.
Okay.
Can't come up later. Can't say 2 or 3 meetings from now, I meant to ask for a waiver on that. And the waiver has to have good cause stated. You can't just say, I want to waive a particular standard. You have to give us a valid reason that we can say, yes, that's a very valid reason for not doing that. What am I missing, folks?
Is there a residential building on that lot?
It's all commercial.
Yeah.
2 structures.
They use for that for selling those jacket. Mostly those 2 buildings are commercial. Commercial building.
But one of them is residential right now?
No,
Nobody's living in the second building?
nobody's living in that house.
Either of the 2 houses?
Right.
Structures.
Yeah.
It's all commercial.
Okay.
So when he gets his, like, when he gets his, well, his application, he has access to these, all this stuff here, they give him that? You know, with all listing of everything, it's all, every one of these things is a question on that. application.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff.
Yes. Oh, yeah, no, it's not one page.
Are both buildings gonna be used for the brewery?
The other one we're gonna use for brewery, and the other one we're gonna use for, to sell some beer and wine, something like that, or liquor, you know.
Okay,
Okay.
brewery and wine.
You'll need to be,
And the
clear.
sales in the
Sales,
second?
yeah.
Yeah.
So you're talking a brewery in one of those 2 buildings and you're gonna sell in the
Brew
second
pub
building?
/ retail sales, yeah. Okay. We'll make that, if it isn't already clear, which I thought it fairly well was, but which building's which. You've already said you're gonna be on town water and sewer, which you have to be for that one. You will need to inform all butters within 250 feet of the property, and that includes across the street, at least 7 days prior to the meeting you submit your application to. I guess it's not the next one. And that is by certified.
So that's for a public hearing?
No, that's just to let us know. Man, it's just a regular requirement. You'll have to do a second mailing if we go to, and I believe we will go to a public hearing, so put it in a database that you can extract the names quickly.
Sure.
Basically, make sure you read, I think you already have, Article 8, site plan review, the entire 20-odd pages. And things like you meet, like floodplain management by, you can literally go on to FEMA's site, create what's called a permit, shows your property and where the floodplain is. In your case, pretty sure there's not one. So there'll be a map with nothing, well, it'll show that it's an aerial image, but it won't have a flood zone, but that is a piece of paper in the file that proves you're not in a flood zone. Do you have any questions?
De minimis, since it falls under a certain square footage, kind of using that as a form of a waiver.
No, the section you're referring to says that the town planner can review. We don't have a town planner.
Yeah.
Therefore, it defaults, everything goes to the planning board.
Mhm.
Everything.
Yep. Let's see what else. Now, if I have any questions about any of this, is there anybody that I can refer to or contact, just so that way I can get a more accurate description of some answers that I would need?
I'm traveling until August.
Your lawyer.
Yeah, lawyer, I don't know if any member's gonna volunteer to be a contact on that.
That's why we need a town plan.
You can try the,
I'm sure the town manager.
Yeah, the town
try the
manager.
town manager
Yeah.
slash code officer, but
Yeah.
Okay. And does any of this fall under like a grandfather clause or something of any sort?
fall under.
A grandfather clause for the property?
There hasn't been a brewery there before.
Yeah, you're changing the use from a retail outlet to essentially restaurant slash brewery, which are covered under the zoning ordinance, which is listed as a planning board deciding that that use is acceptable.
Okay.
Essentially, that it's commercial is the only thing.
It's
Essentially, that it's commercial.
It's
zone.
Route 1 commercial zone, yeah.
Mhm.
But those uses in that zone require planning board approval for the charter.
Your application on the drawing here,
Mhm.
this is a brew pub building. It doesn't say what this one's gonna be.
Okay, I'll have to update that.
Yeah.
And at the moment, nobody's living in either of those buildings?
Nobody is living in there.
There's nobody living in there.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, that kind of thing will be on your site plan, everybody should.
Okay. I think that's all I have. So all I need to fulfill the application is all the things that you listed here
As far as I know, but
in your part.
it's your responsibility to read the 20-odd pages of that section and make sure it's full.
Yep.
Filled out, and in theory, you're supposed to have it in 10 days before the meeting. We're not particularly hard on that, but at least a week.
Yep. Oh, yeah. Yep.
So,
Great.
and the next meeting is, well, the glasses will be over
July
there.
8th,
Right.
July 8th.
Yep. 8th and the 22nd. I'll be missing the 8th, 22nd, and probably the 12th. Have fun, Jason.
All right, I'll do it again. 12, you're not gonna be here either. so-
Probably not. I'm not. My brother wouldn't have even been down to the post office yet to get my mail, so.
No. You said ORC the 6th, I thought.
No, we're not going to the, yeah, to the 26th. We're gonna
Oh,
go see
26th, I
guys.
heard.
Yeah, 26th.
26th, all right.
And that'll be the second planning board of the month of August.
Right, right. All right.
So, yeah, we're presumably maybe next meeting, you would submit your site, all the documentation, as I said.
10 sets.
10 sets, yes, 10 complete sets. At that meeting, we'd schedule a site walk and set the date for a public hearing.
Okay.
After the public hearing, generally, we review the application. Start the review process that night. Okay, anything else?
No, that's all I have.
We wish you good luck.
Great, thanks so much.
All right, there is no other scheduled business, so, sir, you had a question.
All right.
Ask you to please identify yourself.
I got a couple of questions. Approached the code enforcement officer for a couple of projects that I've had.
Who are you?
I'm sorry, Chet Rover. Thank you for having me. Thank you for allowing me on the meeting. We have a couple of projects that I've approached the code enforcement officer with, and he's been a little bit hesitant to make some decisions with my questions. So he decided, he said it would be a good idea for me to pop in on this meeting this evening. First one, the one that I'd like to get onto, and I don't know if he spoke to you or not, Hal, he said he's gonna reach out to you this afternoon. Home Supply is looking to put on a roof structure, open structure, in front of the store.
In front.
In the front, yeah, you aware of that? Did he reach out to
You're
you?
just about all, you've just said about all I know.
Okay, all right, very good. He was hesitant to do it because it's commercial and I guess something about the size of it, so I didn't know if it necessarily had to come before the board, if it just would be, give him the okay to make that decision. It's an open structure on the front, it's basically gonna be, I have a floor plan, a working plan, I apologize, it's not very, very good, but it's 56 feet long, 10 feet off the building, and then there'll be another section that's 38 feet long and 10 feet off the building. So ultimately, it will come off the front of the building 56 by 20 for all intents and purposes.
So basically, you cover the whole front of the building?
To the right-hand side where the grain door is. Sumner has reached out and he tried, it would be a simple process to pop in Mr. Mullins and get a permit for it, and then use, like I said, I wasn't even scheduled, I'm the potential builder, so, and Sumner's out of town, so I said, well, maybe see if I can spur this along. Hopefully I can get the planning board's blessing and or just allow the codes enforcement officer to issue the permit. That's my hope. So I don't know if that's a shot in the dark, but that's project one.
What's that on B here, Carl?
Yeah, expansion of a non-existing, non-residential building or structure, including accessories, if the enlargement increases the total area for all floors within 5 years by more than 2,500 square feet or 25% of total floor area. Well, it's not, according to you.
That can't be 25%.
It's not 25% of the building, it doesn't sound like it's 2,500 square feet in any stretch of the imagination.
It's just a roof.
Yeah, it's an open structure.
Awning type roof.
Yeah, exactly. There may be some skylights, you know, to kind of let light in.
The
What it is they're,
Yeah,
the
corrugated.
custom make the, well, no, it's actually gonna be a shingle roof. They requested a shingle roof,
Oh.
but corrugated skylights, if you will, custom made into it, to let some light in there. But it's generally to keep the sun off and the wheelbarrows that, stuff like that, you know, get ruined and they
Right.
can't sell them. So that's what they're trying to do there. And I have done the math, the 56 by 10 is 560 square feet, and 38 by 10 is 380 for a total of 940 square feet. Virtually, once again, it's a roof, you know, open,
Yeah.
closed.
It's hard to even think about it as square footage, but it is for this purposes.
Yep.
However, it's well under the 2,500 square feet or 25%, whichever is smaller.
What can I make a motion to let him do it?
Hang on.
Mr. Chairman, for the benefit of people who are possibly watching on YouTube or out here in the public, it would be advantageous and helpful for those of us if the property is stated where it's located, what district it's in, what the structure is being used for, so.
Thank you. Gwen, that's a good point. We're talking about Ames True Value at 447 Bath Road. It is currently zoned commercial. And it is a retail outlet.
For?
Name it.
General merchandise.
It's a hardware store. Ames Hardware has the first lead. You can buy hay, nails, or paint,
Force feed.
candy.
I'm sorry, was this Ames?
Yeah.
Yeah, Ames
I'm
True
sorry,
Value.
I'm sorry, okay.
Yeah, it's Ames True Value.
Okay.
And their current building is probably in excess of 25,000 square feet. Maybe
More.
all of it, a lot more,
A lot
close
more.
to 2 acres.
I was just, it's closer to 50,000 square
Yeah,
feet.
yeah, that's my mind, first numbers, so.
Ballpark, it's 50,000
Yeah,
square.
I don't see that it requires planning board review.
I think we should make a motion to give him our goods, whatever, because he's here tonight.
You
and
want
that's
to make a
what he's
motion that
asking.
does not require planning board review?
Yes, I'd like to make a and that we approve,
So don't
support it.
approve, doesn't require approval.
I don't care, I want to say that we support it. We don't have to approve it.
I'll
but
second the
We can
motion.
support it, he'll second the motion.
The planning board supports the application, is that what you're
Yes.
saying? Okay.
Because of its size, it falls
Exactly.
under our waiver.
Right, falls under
Ability.
Article 8,
And it sounds like a good idea to me.
2A.
That way nobody can come back and say that, we didn't,
Exactly.
Oh. I'll second that.
All right. Any discussion? Or discussion, just so you know, the chair does not believe the planning board can say whether we favor or don't favor any application.
What are they gonna do to us?
Can I have the whip, please?
Yeah, the whip could be very large in a different situation. Any other discussion?
So I guess what we're saying is we don't need a motion, we just say that.
We have already had a motion that we
Okay.
find that it does not require.
Okay, the motion is that it does not require.
All those in favor? All those opposed? Passes.
My next step would be, I'm sorry, my next step would be to speak with Bruce, and, I mean, will you be in conversation with him so he can?
Bruce has gotten in the habit of, he likes to have memos from me.
Well, I hate to be burdened with
I'm
more
leaving
work.
real quick. If I get the memo written, he gets it. Otherwise, he gets it verbal.
Okay. So, it should be no issue. Okay, very good, thank you. I won't clog up your meeting too much. I'm also working on another project, in the future here. It's on Youngs Point Road, 67 Youngs Point Road, Wiscasset. Happens to be the residence of Ed and Arlene Polawarczyk. We're looking to expand a building out there, and we need some clarification on road setback, so that we can continue the planning process with the architect. Bruce was a little hesitant to give me that as well. He gave me the fact that he thought it was 33 feet from the center line of Route 1. I'd like to just have some clarification out on Youngs Point Road. What I do have, what Ed did come and find with the ordinance here is page 23. I just want to make sure that we're reading it properly, that residential rural is, road setback is 10 feet from the edge of the road.
No,
Okay?
from the edge of the road, as long as you mean the road right of way, not the visible road, the legal width of the road.
Okay.
Young's Point is almost definitely surveyed. If not, currently there's historical surveys to tell you how wide that road is.
Okay, his property line in one instance is actually in the road, so
Well, that's gonna be cute.
one pin is virtually in the road, so, and the other one is about 4 feet 4 inches, about 4 feet 4 inches off the road. So we're kind of going by that. We're not looking to encroach anywhere near that 10 feet. We're looking to have it 20 feet or more, but we want to make sure that that's accurate.
The legal setback is 10 feet from the front.
Okay.
From front line, which is the road line.
From the road line.
So
And
if that happens
road
to
line-
actually end up being 9 feet from the edge of the road, that's the way it is.
Okay, so. it
Means the
could
road's
be-
in the wrong place, not the property.
Right, so what you're saying is it's his property line,
10 feet from his property line.
That's all I need, so we can continue with planning of that. Thank you very much.
check, see you
Sure.
later, yeah.
Huh?
See you later.
All right, sounds good, thank you. Thank you very much.
Sir.
My name's James Coach, and I'm a resident and business owner in Wiscasset. About a year ago, well, actually, the July 9th, 2018 meeting, to be exact, I came before this board about the issue with granting variances primarily, but other issues dealing with parking in Village 1 and the waterfront. And I urged the committee, or the commission, the committee to, the planning board, to make this a high priority, to revise portions of the ordinance that dealt with this, because we have a serious issue with parking off-street. There's not enough off-street parking, as we know, and what precipitated my interest in this initially was both the MDOT project and the fact that this board had granted a variance to a property on Water Street that CEI had owned to be a 6 apartment multi-dwelling. I understand that was approved by them. It was approved because there was, quote, no blockage of parking requirements on the waterfront. However, from reviewing the ordinances, it's actually not quite clear. There are things that contradict the ordinance, and you can review portions of the ordinance as it currently reads that can be interpreted one way or the other by various lawyers and parties. For example, in 2.7 on the building laws, this is Village 1, not waterfront, but it's similar. However, this requirement, in Village 1, a lot owner is required to provide at least 1.5 on-site off-street parking spaces for each residential unit, unless approved otherwise by the planning board. However, this requirement shall not apply to residential units located inside buildings existing as of March 10, 1990, if provision of the required amount of off-street parking is not feasible. Well, you can read that sentence about the proviso to be, are these existing apartments within a building as of 1990, or is it the building existing as of 1990? It can be interpreted two different ways, because the requirement should be for the apartment units that are already approved, not for the structure. And so, as of March 1990, should actually be listed after the term residential units, but before building. Otherwise, one is led to believe that anyone who has a building that's built before 1990 can put as many residential units in there because they have a building that was built pre-1990. So we have a number of these issues going on, and it's always been an issue in this town, but it's really come to a real serious emergency level now that we've lost so much street parking in this town as a result of the MDOT improvement project. And so I'm before you today. I've taken it upon myself in the interim to draft up some revisions for your consideration to the current ordinances relates to building parking requirements within zoning. And in red are my additions or amendments or reconfiguration of the wording. I've listed that in red. If I've repositioned some of the things like I just mentioned about the May 1990 being after residential unit before structure, that's in some of the sections. I've also tried to elaborate. With Village 1, with the waterfront village, we're at a crisis mode. If we, for example, I happen to know that there's been I'm not sure if it's closed, but there's been an offer made on the other CEI building. If that is suddenly before you as another multi-housing unit, it will kill all remaining housing left, remaining parking on that side of Water Street that we have for public parking. Because we've already lost a lot of our street parking on Water Street because of the project, and the Haggett lot is already being used heavily by residents of the first CEI unit. And we also have an issue in town that other towns are starting to deal with, and it brings to mind a question that was posed by the chairman of this group at a meeting in January of last year about Airbnbs. There are a number of Airbnbs in Village 1, Waterfront Village, and so on. None of them are regulated. None of them are listed, to my knowledge, as registered businesses in the town. So they fall through the cracks. And they fall through the cracks as far as our own regulations on requirements for parking for additional residences and private-owned residences. So you've got an Airbnb that somebody lives in, and they've got 3 or 4 rooms out for Airbnb, and they got 1 space for off-street parking. That's illegal. It violates our policies, but we don't even know it because we don't register Airbnbs. So in some of my proposed language there, you see I've inserted Airbnbs as well as B&Bs that they all have requirements for that parking. We did have that covered under private residences, but it's not well articulated. And that covers, according to our current ordinance, the requirement for those parking spaces, at least one parking space per rented room, is all districts, including village and waterfront. But it's never been enforced. And it's not, can't be enforced because it's not regulated, because we don't even know they exist as businesses. So I'm in hopes that you will take my rough attempts at doing some language improvement and some additions to portions of the ordinance to safeguard the future commercial prosperity and quality of life for residents living in Village 1 and the waterfront, because we can't sustain this. Yes?
As a member of the planning board and a member of the ordinance review committee, personally, I like what you're saying, but it's not up to us to do this. You have to go to the selectmen, and the selectmen have to order the ordinance review committee to review the ordinance. The planning board isn't allowed to change the ordinances, and the ordinance review committee doesn't get to choose their topics. It comes to us from the select. I'm not trying to be smart. I'm just
No, absolutely. That's
so
fine.
what you're saying.
That's your interpretation, but I disagree.
Yeah, but I disagree
I've
as
sat
well.
on other commissions.
Okay.
Oh, let me
And-
just tell you my opinion, because
Yes.
I've been on this board for many, many years, probably longer than anybody sitting at this table. And the way the ordinance review committee was formed is that it is a job of the planning board. And what happened was, we didn't have time, all of us, to get together and review every ordinance. So somebody came up with the idea, let's do a subcommittee, it'll be the ordinance review committee. Well, suddenly this ordinance review committee, and I've never said anything because I get the work and I've volunteered to be on it. We've got to be more careful about our ordinances, because number one, our ordinances are not laws in this town. And the only way that an ordinance is enforced is if the selectmen have the police enforce it. I know this because I've had a couple of things happen in my lifetime here in this town, that when I went to the chief of police, they said, we don't need to enforce an ordinance unless the selectmen tell us we have to do something about it or whatever. So ordinances have got to be better defined in this community. The other thing is, he's correct about Airbnbs. The only town or city in the state of Maine right now that regulates Airbnbs is the city of Portland. But all of us should be looking at that, because in Wiscasset, whether you like it or know about it, there are many Airbnbs operating right now. Not regulated. The parking is, I mean, I see what we put him through tonight, I can't even think his name now. It's saying, well, I'm gonna do this, you're gonna do that, you're gonna do this. Yet people are running businesses in our towns with Airbnbs that nobody's even questioning. So I think if I go to a first meeting with the ordinance review committee, I want to see an ordinance written about Airbnbs. I want to see us look at the ordinances in a way of, how is this affecting our town? What is happening in our town? What do we need to use the ordinance for? They're not laws. They are not laws. And they are not enforced unless the selectmen direct the police department to do it. That is not what I thought before, but
Well,
that is the way it is.
According to my understanding of the ordinances, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the commission, the board, or the committee responsible for certain ordinances actually can take it upon themselves to revise and submit for approval.
I have never heard that we
Oh,
can't.
absolutely, it's happened
I've never
many,
heard
many
that.
times
No.
in other committees.
We can
What
do.
happens then is then staff, and Carl can speak to this because we worked in historical preservation commission things that went through the ordinance review board and were corrected, commented on, Jason was involved in that as well, and then brought before the select board, then taken to the public vote.
Just to be correct, the ORC cleared it with the selectmen to do that work before. We didn't initiate it. It was the HPC needs this work done. The two committees asked the select to authorize us to do the work. It is my opinion as the current chair of the ordinance review that we do not self-initiate. we can ask the selectmen,
Up until
Yeah, I don't,
now.
I just,
we
that's,
can
See, up
ask the
until now-
selectmen, may we do this? But we cannot do it on our
I've
own,
never heard,
because
I've never heard that.
if we can, because we can go to all the trouble of doing the work, and the selectmen can say,
Have you got the?
we don't want this
Where
done.
is the
That's
job
what
of, yes,
happened
could
with
you
the
read
slow
that, please? Let's listen to what our job is.
The Ordinance Review Committee, hereinafter referred to as the committee, shall, at the request of the select board, provide the select board, town manager, planning board, and town planner with advice and recommendations on existing ordinance revisions, ordinance amendments, ordinance adoptions, and rezoning applications. Issues that may be considered include land use, community planning, growth-related matters, general ordinance development, and other issues which may ultimately affect the quality of life for present and future residents of the area. The objectives of the committee are to provide an opportunity for public involvement in the community planning process, to create an open process whereby the public is encouraged to participate, and to provide peer review on general ordinance alterations and proposed land use change related matters.
Well, you mentioned planning board, what's the planning board's job? Just to
I
be
can
clear.
tell you that.
No, I want it read out of you. What is the planning board responsible for? Because what I understood is when I was first on the planning board, we were the ones who said, let's make an ordinance committee.
And that's probably true, but the
It's-
current,
I know,
the
but I'm
current
just
land use
saying,
ordinance create an ordinance review, and the minority of the board is supposed to be planning board. The majority is supposed to be non-planning board members. Now, we haven't got any volunteers. We're already over the 3 authorized. And
I just know we
and
started
so
doing it because we
it's
couldn't be here for
it's
3 hours every meeting going over ordinances, so I don't know how it got to where it is now, but.
I know I've been on
Now
it
it's a
now
subcommittee
for
doing the same.
3 or 4 years, and up until now, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but we've only gone in the direction that the selectmen have pushed us in.
And we've had some cases where they've told us to do something, and then, I can't name them off the top.
And we did
And
it.
we've been asked, and they either ignored it or they threw it away.
So you're saying
Oh, the non-smoking,
the stance of the committee is not to move forward with any,
self-initiation.
what they view as improvements or changes to the ordinance unless so directed by the board of selectmen?
Yes,
Right,
yes.
we can ask the
Okay.
the selectmen for the.
Okay, well, but
For instance, there are a couple of changes coming on, one is in the, changes to the registry of deeds on recording the plans.
Uh-huh.
And there's some minor, related to that, there's a couple of minor places in the subdivision ordinance that need tweaking.
Mhm.
I will self-initiate, as I know that that change is coming, we require a Mylar. The registry's not gonna take a Mylar after January 1.
Right.
Why do we want a Mylar if we're not, we don't want it here in Wiscasset.
Understood.
So, I shall ask them when I get back in the fall to
Okay.
self-initialize to change that.
Uh-huh.
So there are 2 routes. You can go to the select board and ask for us to work on it.
Okay.
And we'd be happy to do it once you ask us.
Okay, and as you see, the
And 2,
memorandum
we
that I've
can-
actually written, which summarizes these changes I've put forward, is actually written to both you and the board of selectmen.
That's
So
good.
And
I will submit it for consideration at
ask
the
them,
next select board meeting.
and ask for us.
And
And
then at the following meeting, ask them for what their disposition is.
Right.
Because if they turn it to us, we're happy to work on it, And it's not that we, up until now, that's the way it's been, at least in my 4 years, that's the way it's been.
But I do feel it's very critical to be addressed because there's a lot of development changes going on here, and if we're not ready for them, we're gonna find ourselves with some real issues. So, thank you for your time and consideration.
and as you know, I
Thank you for
personally
your
support
input.
some of your.
Yeah,
I will.
there's no doubt about it, there's a problem down there.
I will, if you're gonna come to the next select board meeting,
Oh, I'm almost always there.
then I will try to remember to send a memo to the town manager.
I'll forward that
Asking
same,
him
I
to-
forwarded that copy, that menu, to the town manager
And
earlier
say,
today
we've
as
been
well.
approached, and we think that this is I think I can speak for the ordinance review. We think this is something that we should be addressing.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
That's, it will be, but we've got to be pushed,
I understand,
Because if we do it and they don't want it, we're wasting our time.
Understood, okay.
And we can't pass an ordinance.
And
That's
he's
the
right, we
problem.
did smoking
Selectmen
ordinance and then they
decide what goes
rejected it.
on
We
the
worked on it for 3 meetings.
That's sad.
And then they said, no, and they started us
And
on
the
it,
actual,
and
the
then they
actual
dropped it.
enforcer of an ordinance is the code enforcement officer. That's his name.
Yes, yes.
And, but all he can do is a certain level, then it's up to the town to say, we will pursue it in court.
And we need a town plan.
I know, we need a town.
We did it.
Well, it passed money for half of one. And she quit. Before she got the job.
Yeah.
Or before they got the money to get the job. And paper converting. All right. Anybody else have anything?
At 7:40, I make my favorite motion that we adjourn.
And I'll second that favorite motion.
All those in favor? We stand adjourned.
Thank you for your input, James.
Are there any other choices that I have now? I made about 11 copies, I believe.
Yeah.
But, something.
Mr. James. James, would you be interested in being on the ordinance review committee? We're looking for volunteers.
Possibly, actually, are there any vacancies on this committee?
I think we're full, but subcommittee is not.
Yeah. Well, she now functions there. And
Yeah,
that's the same.
Yeah, but not only that.
Yep.
She'd have to go.
Well, it's up to you.
She's in the downtown area, you can't have noise.
She's in,
I was sleeping.
Waterfront.